This is the Living in Mid-Bloom podcast, lighthearted and heartfelt conversations about what it looks like to live, heal, and blossom in middle age. I'm your host, April Pruitt. Let's get our bloom on. Hello, audience, and welcome to Living in Mid-Bloom. My name is April Pruitt, your host, and we have a great guest today. Her name is Stacey Montgomery. We have known each other for years, though I have to say most of that time we didn't really stay in touch and really didn't know each other, but that's the way life works. Check out what Stacey's doing at staceymdesign.com. That's Stacey, Stacey Design.com. Also, look for her foundation, mysuperpowersfoundation.org. That's exactly how it sounds, mysuperpowersfoundation.org. Hi, Stacey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Stacey, the name of your business is Stacey M Design.
Yes.
And you're a social emotional learning innovator and author. And that innovator part is, to me, it's fascinating, the things I know you've done. But just to outline what you do, you create innovative social emotional learning resources for use at schools and at home to help kids feel empowered. And what was your motivation? Was part of that your son, or were you interested in that long before you had him? I know that you were always interested in art and writing, but I wasn't sure about that connection.
Right. I had not heard of social emotional learning before my son was born. In fact, I wasn't familiar with the term until after he graduated from high school. But his experiences in school, and particularly middle and high school, definitely informed my what I do now, and I guess motivate me. In IEP, he had difficulties in school, bullying, didn't have many friends, didn't feel welcome. So that did form the basis of my social emotional learning programs. I have 3 of them. His experience particularly informed the first one, which is called Wise, Different, Awesome.
Okay, and I love that. I love just those simple words have so much meaning. Let me get back to when we first met. So I believe, was that 2007, 2008?
I'm thinking it was before that, but it was a while ago.
Maybe it was, maybe 2005 or 6.
Yeah, I think it was closer.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
My God, we were just small children at that time. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking 2005, maybe 2006, because it was the last time I went to the National Stationery Show, and my sister she always came with me every year that I did the show. She joined me, and that year she and her now husband came with me, joined me there, and it was right before their wedding, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And they got married I believe they got married in 2006.
Okay.
So I think it was in 2006.
So that was my next question, because that was my first year going to the show. So this is actually before this was your full-time gig. So this was still a side hustle for you then.
Right. Exactly.
When was the first year you had been there then? How much before that 2005 year were you there? Because I was curious about that.
Yeah, it was in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
that show is not cheap.
No. Yeah, I don't remember the first year, but yeah, it was in the 90s. I only went once. I think the year 2006, whatever year it was the only time I went, in the 2000s. So because I, after 9/11, things got very,
sure.
Things were very different, for that show, in New York in general, and people were concerned about large events, and so
That's
yeah.
a good point.
So before that, I went about maybe 3 or 4 times before 2001. But yeah, I do not recall the first time.
And you're right. You need a team. It's great that your sister and her husband were able to help you. Because each year I had brought different people with me because some
Right.
were behaving badly, and I had to say, no, you can't come this time because you made my trip a little harder than I wanted it to be. you know, because it's a
Right.
lot.
You did the opposite. Yes.
The decorations, setting up the hotel,
Yes.
and walking around that place. I mean, it's a workout. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's terribly interesting. It's just fascinating what people come up with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were the few people of color that had something out there. We were just trying to fill some space. But what I really loved is that you had different children of color and hair. And
Yes.
I really loved that. They were so sweet. And it surprises me that we weren't seeing much of that then.
No, and well, you know what? That was kind of good and bad. I think the because we were so few, we got some attention. I don't know exactly what your experience was, but I did pretty well at the shows, and I think, well, I certainly believe in my product line and in my art and all of that. But because there were so few others in that huge building, there were so many hundreds of exhibitors, and so few offered products that had diversity in them.
Right.
So because of that, I did pretty well. Now, when I say pretty well, I'm not talking about tens and twenties and thirties and $50,000 worth of orders, but I was fairly satisfied with what I walked away with.
And it does feel good when you see that store is willing to buy your product,
Hmm.
put it on display. And,
Yes.
that is a good feeling. And it's good that they also see that there's a void and that there's a need.
Right.
And that they're just not for kids of colors, for anybody that they have in their life that just doesn't look like everybody else. So
Exactly. Exactly.
I really love that. So was it just the cards you had at that time, or did you have stationery? I'm trying to remember.
I had greeting cards. I had thank you note cards. It was based mostly greeting cards and thank you note cards. The main reason why I stopped doing the show was because I started to do a lot of personalization, a lot of custom orders, birth announcements, baby shower invitations, and things along those lines that were customized. And I did order some, I did offer some imprintables at the show, but I found that it was much more cost effective and to simply just have my website and offer them directly to the retailer, to the consumer. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense because you're not creating something that, gee, I hope it sells. You already know that this is what they want specifically, and you can fit those needs.
Right, right. And again, it was really because I was doing the custom work. So on my website at the time, let's say you wanted to order a children's party invitation. So I had maybe about 20 different faces you could choose from. So you could choose from about 3 or 4 different skin tones. For girls, I had maybe 7 or so different hairstyles. You could choose whether to put a bow in the girl's hair. So we placed the order.
God, I just love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
So when you place the order, you would give me the custom wording for the party invitation. And then you would select the, what the child would look like. And then I would send an email, the customer approve. They would approve it, or ask for changes, and I would go from there. And I expanded from greeting cards to focusing on birthday party invitations, birth announcements, baby shower invitations, but also things like placemats and spiral notebooks and different other items, luggage tags, and people just ordered them from my website. So it wasn't really that The reason I stopped going to the show was because I was focused on customization and direct to consumer. And sure, I could offer albums, and I did offer some albums at the last show, but it just was easier, and more cost effective for me to just to sell directly to the consumer.
Well, and that's what you find out when you start diving into different areas and seeing what works. I know that was my first national show, and then since then I had done some smaller ones. They just weren't selling as I had hoped, but that's another story.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I mean, the stationary gift business is crowded and it's tough.
Yeah. I know when we spoke before in 2008, I think was around the time, because I know there were a lot of layoffs then, including at my firm,
Hmm.
that you got laid off and you made the decision to do the stationary thing full time.
Right.
Was it because you felt there wasn't another option, or was it, you know what, here's my opportunity to finally do what I love? I was just kind of curious about that.
It was more, here is my opportunity to do what I love, But I mean, it really wasn't that I gave it a whole lot of thought and that type of thing. The opportunity was there, and so I it, I was always doing my business. I always had my business, for years, and so the fact that I didn't go into my corporate office just gave me more time to do it. I mean, I would do it before work, after work, whatever, on weekends anyway. And so it wasn't, again, it wasn't like a long, serious, sit down and look at this numbers. It just, the opportunity was there. And I did continue to look for another job for a little bit, but I was always doing my business. So I just kept doing it.
Yeah. And the one thing about, the specific businesses we're in, it takes a lot of energy to the resume
Hmm.
and the interviews and the competition out there,
Yeah.
and what schools did you go to, and are you at a level where you think you should be paid more than someone who may be younger?
Hmm.
It's all of that. And I get that. I get that. I'm curious, what did your son think about what you were doing? Did he have any interest or any clue that he may have been the inspiration for what you dealt with him? I mean, I can't imagine being a parent and knowing your son is being bullied and not being treated nice. I don't know how you do that, but the way to empower that is by what you've done, is having things out there available for these children.
Right. Well, I didn't turn my attention to social emotional learning, the guided journals. Well, the social emotional learning and working with schools until after I graduated. So, yeah, I mean, he knows now that what I do has his experiences definitely impact what I do, and he is part of my why. Yes, he understands that, and he understands. He knows that I post about him a lot. He sees the posts. He's fine with them. So I think he appreciates that I'm doing this and that I am taking his experiences and using them to help other kids. So yes, I think he definitely appreciates that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just love that. I know that. So, starting off with the cards, I know you were interested in writing, and we had talked about, being younger,
Mm,
and when you're first thinking about what you're going to do to make a living. And I know in your case, your parents were very invested in you being a professional of some sort, whatever that may be.
right. Hmm.
And I thought it was interesting because this happens to most kids. Is, okay, what does the parent want? Because here you are at age 18. Most kids don't have a real clue of who they are and what they want to do. But when you say, "Oh, I'm going to be a doctor," then that sounds great. But you were so honest in saying, "You know what? This is not my bag. So I'll be an attorney."
Right.
you know, I just and I know that's a great experience. I'm sure it's helped you, in your business, no doubt. But did your parents feel any kind of way when you kind of tried to figure things out? I mean, were they questioning anything, or were they? And I know we also talked about the fact that who knew that you could make a living in this thing that you love.
Right.
That there's all of this openness and these things that are available for creatives out there. That's just
Hmm.
something that, honestly, when you think about the average Black family, it's like, do you even get that opportunity to be a part of that? Can you take the risk to try to do something like that when, you need a good job?
So I've always been involved in the legal field. So even though I stopped practicing law a while ago, but the job I had in corporate was a law related job. It wasn't in the legal department, but it was. I definitely used my legal training, and even now I do some contract work for just one attorney who I've known for a while. I do some writing for him.
Oh, okay.
And my father had died in 1997, so I was still, working in the legal, strictly in the legal world. Not strictly in the legal world. I was still had my corporate job back then. So, and they also were well aware of my side gig. In fact, every year for Christmas cards, they got them for me. They were like, Stacey, have you mailed my Christmas card yet? For
Mm-hmm.
them to send to whoever they sent them to. And so yeah, I mean, they were fine with what I chose to do. And my mother was aware that I stopped working in corporate and was doing my business full time.
Oh,
And she was fine with that as well. They basically cared about us being happy. My parents never pressured us to do one thing or another.
oh, good.
They always cared about education. They cared about us doing well in school. They spent money on my sister and I attending private schools. They said that we can go to whatever college we wanted to go to, and that we could do whatever we wanted to do. So that was their thing, do whatever you wanted to do. And it just so happened that both of us wanted to have professional careers.
What a blessing.
Yeah,
That's a blessing.
yeah. And I decided I wanted to be a doctor because when I was about 3 years old, I liked my pediatrician. And that was that. I mean, it's as simple as that. And as you know, I recently published a new guided journal called What Makes You a Leader. And one of the things that I talk about in that book and that I teach kids about is setting an example and being inspiring. That's one of those are two of the things that leadership is all about. You inspire others. You become role models. And so that is exactly what that doctor was. He was nice to me. I was like 3. He was nice to me. He made me laugh, whatever. I don't remember
That's funny.
anything specific about him. I don't remember his name or what he looked like. But I remember that I liked him.
Wow.
And so from a very early age, I said I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician. That was why. And I kind of just stuck with that. And
That is
right.
that is crazy. He's nice. I'm going to do that too.
Right. I mean, that a lot of kids, want to be actresses or professional athletes. They see somebody on television, like, oh, I want to do that. Or models. You see a model, oh, that's cool. She's so beautiful, blah, blah. Professional athletes, oh, look at him doing this and that. Look how much money he's making. Lawyers, whatever, artists. A lot of the times it is you decide on a profession because you are inspired by something by somebody else, whether it's somebody famous or it could be a teacher. In my case, it was my doctor. And so when my parents came in, parents are oftentimes your first and your best teachers. Now, best can mean a lot of things, but they're certainly your role models. So if they model, negative things, a child is more likely to emulate that.
Mm-hmm.
So around our house, my father, he was an AME minister. He was also active in the civil rights movement. We learned a lot about Black history in church because it certainly wasn't taught in schools.
Mm.
But, one message that we got just from being in that house was that as Black people, as Black children, you need to know that you can do whatever you want to do. It was unusual, relatively unusual, um, for there to be Black doctors, lawyers, professionals in general. I mean, there were many out there, but certainly wasn't as common as it is now.
Sure.
At the time, particularly, still kind of the case now, but you look around the community that we were in and the members of our church, and just there are very few that were college graduates.
Right.
Both my parents were college graduates. My father graduated from college, later in life. I believe he was in his 40s or maybe even early 50s when he graduated from college. He was 20 years older than my mother.
Good for him.
So he was so probably his late 40s when he graduated from college. But so the message was, and again, it wasn't like we sat down to have these conversations, but the message we got from being around him, being around my mother, being around other
like-minded Black folks that are
exactly
walking the walk,
right, sitting in church, sitting in Sunday school, was that opinion of us is that we're not that bright, and that we shouldn't be or can't be doctors, we can't be lawyers, we can't be captains of business, we can't run major companies, all of these things that we can't do, or that it's not common. So their message was, you could be whatever you want to be. It wasn't like you have to be a professional,
Gotcha.
They wanted us to be happy, do whatever we wanted to do, and certainly be financially secure. And so the path to that was education. So they were willing to find a way to finance pretty expensive private schools for both my sister and me. By the time I was a senior, we lived in New Jersey. I went to high school in suburbs of Philadelphia. So, I mean, I actually traveled over an hour each way by public transportation. Had to ride a bus to Philadelphia, to get a train from Philadelphia to school,
Wow.
to the, and then walk a few blocks from the train station to school. Fortunately, when I was a senior, I was able to drive. But, that was,
wow.
You had to do what you had to do. And then when it came to college, they're like, whatever college you want to go to. I mean,
wow.
They're like, whatever. And so that was their attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't.
Well, I find this interesting because thinking or having that being told to you, this positive, and I don't know if your family was the same, but my parents never talked about the negative aspects of racial inequality. I mean, obviously things would occur, but they dealt with it when and I just wondered if your parents were the same, because even though we're aware of other stuff happening, they just didn't focus on that.
Well, I don't know. I won't say that they didn't, but even though a lot of the things that we heard were through my father's sermons and through Sunday school, things like that. And so, yeah, my father was a minister. He was a pastor he was an AME minister. I don't know that they necessarily tried to or made a conscious effort to keep the negativity away from us. But what I can say is that I wasn't the type of person who, it wasn't my thing to hang out with my parents and with the older folks. My sister was into that. I was too busy playing somewhere. So like if they had people over, or we went to someone else's house, or after church, when we're waiting around for my father to be done, or my sister was always kind of like sitting with the adults, just listening. And I was always like just annoyed that I'm still there. I always had my,
right.
If I was in my house, I was, playing with my dolls or drawing or doing something or reading. So I'm not saying that they didn't talk about it, but it wasn't like something that I heard a lot, but not because I don't think they consciously made it.
You were a kid.
Yeah, I was like, whatever,
It's like, well, yeah, exactly. What's the age difference between you and your sister?
2 years. She's 2 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that isn't, and I should kind of self-correct. It's not that, they never said, I guess what I meant was they never said derogatory things like in
Mm-hmm.
response to
Right.
what they did was like we were on vacation with another Black family. My dad was in the military, and this other family was in the military too. And so
Mm-hmm.
we took trailers out west to see the Grand Canyon, and this is in the 60s. You're just not seeing Black families doing that, but there we were.
Right.
And we went through some small town, and my dad went through a yellow because you're hauling a trailer, and he didn't want to make a sudden stop. So he gets pulled over by the police. We end up going to this courthouse for him to talk to a judge. Now, I'm a kid, and I see this happening, and it kind of scared me because all I see is, here are these police. There, I can't see my dad. He's in some room somewhere. A couple of hours later, we were able to just go on our way. But in listening to the parents talk, my dad basically they were both in the military. So my dad was very good at, okay, so I'm going to show this person what we have in common.
Right.
That we had risked our lives for this country. And it made him look beyond the color of my father's skin, and that we weren't doing anything except being on vacation. So that, that taught me a lot, but it also, it scared me because anybody can do anything.
Right.
So all of this is totally off track on the podcast, but but that's okay. So in talking about living in mid-bloom, when did you think, or when did you realize you became an old broad? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's an interesting question because it's all about mindset, and I consider myself extremely young. I consider myself. I think it's weird that in reality I am in my 50s. I'm closer to 60 than 50 at this point. And there are some people who are my age who have grandchildren, and there are some people who just behave differently than I do at this age. So I would still do the occasional cartwheel. I but I just have this silly, very silly, in my opinion, youthful attitude about myself. If I walked into a room of people who are, maybe in their 60s or so, a little bit older than me, people who one might consider, senior citizen, I would not be able to identify with that group. But if there's a group of people who are more like in their 30s, I will feel more comfortable.
I so agree with you.
It's mindset. It's mindset.
Absolutely.
Now sometimes I joke around like I love to, when I'm being lazy, I love to ask my son to do things like I might be sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching the television might be on, and I may have left the remote, like on the counter. I say, Isaiah, can you come get the remote for me? No. I'll say, Isaiah, come down here. He comes down here. And he's like, what? Like, can you get the remote for me? And it's literally like I went to stand up and walk 3 steps. And so he just looks at me, and I said, come on, do it for your old mother, help your old mother out.
Pulling the old mother card. Yeah.
Exactly. Help you out. Yeah.
I just did a cartwheel, but I cannot get to that remote.
Exactly. I can't. Exactly. Come on, help your old mother.
That's funny. It really is the mindset, because there are a lot of times when I'll see people and they're my age. I'm 64.
Mm-hmm.
And they look and they sound old.
Right.
I'm just like, is there this old voice thing that happens at a certain age that suddenly you're like all craggly and, not clear? It's almost like, I think about the Andy Griffith Show and Aunt B.
Mm-hmm.
Aunt B was like in her 50s.
Right. But she looked like she was like around her 80s.
Yeah. It's just like, it really was just, I never really thought about that until looking at some of these old shows. And I'm like, my God,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you can still, dress a certain way. It's just, but it's like old fashioned mindset. It is, to me, it's an old fashioned mindset.
Exactly. Exactly. And I
Yeah.
just, I refuse to go out that way, and I joke with my husband. I was like, we're going to be in our 80s, and I'm going to still love guinea pigs. I'm going to still be silly, and
Yes.
and it's just who I am.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, sense of humor is, and I think that's something I think that's probably saved me in most of my life is that you got to have a sense of humor in this
you
world.
do.
You got to be able to laugh at yourself, laugh at things. You got to love guinea pigs.
Everybody should love guinea pigs.
They're
Definitely, you're
cute.
here.
But I have my two cats, Hoss and Allie, and they're just like, living the freaking life. Right now they're just napping, and I'm just awaiting their next order for, whatever they want. So, but I but
Living the
but
life,
it's
right?
so true. Yeah. But it's so true. It's a mindset
Mm-hmm.
and it's the way you look at the world. And I've looked at things a little differently, losing my mom, and
Yeah.
you start losing people, but it's like I always want to be surrounded by, I don't care how old you are, how young. I just want to be surrounded by, good vibration people. That's all I want, you know?
I agree.
So, Stacey, you've been so open about so many things, and I thank you. One thing I wanted to ask you, what do you think was one of your most brave moments after turning 50?
Well, I would say deciding to make a shift in my business to focus on social emotional learning. Not only focusing on it, I did start to create my first guided journal. I created my first guided journal in 2017, but it was maybe a year later that I really started to focus on social emotional learning. And I decided to create curricula for elementary schools and to shift my business so that that was the primary focus. So, for example, before when we first met, I was doing the greeting cards and stationery. My business was pretty much 100% stationery and gifts. So then it shifted to primarily custom personalization. And I added other things like placemats and spirals and folders and mugs and things like that. And so then my next shift was to introduce hardcover journals and guided journals. So now where I am now is that I am focused on schools, working with schools with my social emotional learning program. And that was brave because I do not have a background in education and I or counseling. So I decided that I was going to, number one, write a curriculum and then talk to schools and convince them that they need to use it.
Wow.
So that was definitely brave, and it's been a journey. It has not been easy, and I'm happy to say that I am making headway as far as getting my programming into schools.
I know you said you had an appointment yesterday, I think, with a principal that you had been working with. And to me, that's exciting that here you are meeting with the school. It's just, that's phenomenal. And of course, the other part of that is the kudos that you've been getting directly from the children that you're helping.
Right.
I just, kids, we know kids are pretty honest.
Yes.
Give me an example of some recent feedback you got, because that is really moving.
Okay, so there is a child, a girl. Her name is Evelyn. I'm friends with her mom. They have been using her mom bought my books for her daughter starting maybe 2 years ago. And actually, when she first started buying my books, I did not know her mother, but then through networking, we became friends, and now we're pretty good friends. But she's purchased my books for her daughter and her son for about 2 years now. And recently, her daughter participated in a program. It's called Dream Scribers. And through this program, kids write books. So her daughter's 8 years old, and she wrote a book.
Oh.
And as part of this process, there is a book launch celebration. So the program, which I think is, it's like several weeks, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, they go through that process and they write their books. Then their books are published. So they received their books, I think about a week ago. And then next weekend is a big celebration where all the authors, all these child authors will be there, and people are invited, and they will sell the books and sign the books. So as part of the celebration, she had to say who is part of your launch team. And then, of course, she mentioned her mom and her siblings and some other family members. But she said me, that I should be a part of her launch team. And I was like, what?
Oh,
so
wow.
Her mom called me. So it was like, did you have a few minutes to talk? She called me. She told me this. And I, I see Evelyn every now and then. She tends to, they often participate in the events put on by my nonprofit. And sometimes her mom brings them to some evening meetings that we both attend. So I hadn't seen Evelyn. It had been, I don't know, at least a month or maybe more since I had seen her. So for her to think about me, think about my books, and say that I, in my books, inspired her to write a book.
Wow.
I was shocked. I was happy. I was almost in tears.
Oh.
It was crazy.
It's such a sincere thing. It was like, well, of course. It wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. And her book, I was looking for a copy of it. I believe it's called Two Awesome Friends. And it's all about how two people, they're animals, I believe a giraffe and a pig, could be so right. different and yet be friends. And one of my books is called Why is Different Awesome? And it's a similar message.
Right.
It's okay to be friends with somebody who is different from you, and that we are all unique and special.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
That is it's so sweet.
Yeah.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old, and yes, her book is called Two Awesome Friends. And at the very end, there's this quote, 2 people can be different and still be friends.
Oh.
So that's what the book is all about.
8 years old.
8 years old.
And that when asked, who's really a part of her posse.
Exactly. She mentioned me. I'm like, what?
That is just, that it's an emotional expansion. I mean, at that age that you can speak to that. When I know at 8, it was like,
right.
Where's my lunch?
Right. And yes, so that's, my books have impact.
Yeah.
And
yeah, they do. And there's got to be a wider audience. It's just too amazing. It's just too amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, for sharing some wonderful, some difficult, some interesting, just things about your life. I very much appreciate it. I would certainly love to have you back. We've got a lot of other things that we can talk about. I just, I wish you all good things. And of course, we'll be staying in touch. So.
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Check out what Stacey's doing at staceymdesign.com. That's Stacey, Stacey mdesign.com. Also, look for her foundation, mysuperpowersfoundation.org. That's exactly how it sounds, mysuperpowersfoundation.org. Thank you for joining me today on Living in Midbloom. I hope you found this episode insightful, meaningful, and maybe it's given you something to think about. I invite you to share your positive reviews or ideas on topics you would like me to touch on by leaving your comments on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, Podchaser, or Podcast Addict. We are all divine beings who just want to be seen, heard, and loved. Have a beautiful day.